She was left in the mud, treated like nothing, dirty, broken, and forgotten by a world that called her waste. But when a quiet stranger saw her not as trash, but as something sacred, everything changed. This is a story of survival, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't save you, but reminds you you're worth saving. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to this channel and show some love with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's jump into the story. The rain hadn't stopped in hours. It beat down in thick, heavy drops, soaking everything in its path, and turning the ground into a slop of mud and waste. Near the edge of the livestock yard, beneath a broken drainage pipe, a girl crouched low to the ground like a wounded animal. Her name was Nora, though she hadn't heard anyone speak it in a long time. She was wrapped in shreds of clothing that clung to her skin, her bare feet half buried in the wet, clinging dirt. Her hair, a deep auburn that once might have been beautiful, was now a tangled mess stuck to her face like threads of blood. She flinched when footsteps squelched nearby. Her voice cracked as she hissed, "Don't touch me." She didn't lift her eyes. Her fingers gripped the earth tightly, clawing at the mud as though she could disappear into it. "I'm dirty. I'm useless. I'm nothing," she muttered to herself. The pigs in the pen behind her gave a half-hearted grunt, but didn't care about her words. They never did. But someone else heard. Yalan was a field technician, sent to check the failing storm beacon nearby. He was used to seeing the aftermath of neglect in this forgotten corner of the world. What he wasn't used to seeing was a girl curled up like a ghost on the edge of a pig pen, looking like she belonged more to the earth than the sky. He stopped in his tracks, blinking through the rain. She didn't move, didn't acknowledge him beyond the warning in her voice. But she didn't run either. He didn't speak at first. Words would have felt like an invasion. Instead, he took off his coat, thick, old, still warm from his body, and crouched down slowly. Careful not to startle her, he extended the coat toward her. She recoiled at first, snarling like a feral creature. Her teeth showed, but there was no threat in them. Only fear. "I'm not going to hurt you," Yalan said softly, his voice almost drowned by the rain. She looked up then, just long enough for him to see her eyes wide, violet, rimmed with filth and fire. There was something wild in her gaze, something raw and angry. But underneath all of that, there was a flicker of something else. Exhaustion, hopelessness. A small piece of her still wanted to be seen. The rain soaked through his shirt as he knelt in the mud. Still he stayed. Nora watched him, suspicious. She didn't take the coat, but she didn't flee either. That was something. When he gently draped the coat over her shoulders, she gasped, not from fear, but from confusion. No one had touched her gently in so long she'd forgotten what it felt like. She hunched deeper into herself, arms hugging her ribs, the coat falling loosely around her frame. It was far too big, but it smelled like warmth, wool, and something else that felt like safety. "I don't want your pity," she spat. Her voice cracked near the end, betraying something more fragile underneath her anger. "This isn't pity," Yalan said. "It's cold, you're wet, that's all." She looked at him like she didn't understand the words. Maybe she didn't. Maybe the concept of someone caring, even in the smallest way, was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. Behind them, one of the pigs gave a loud grunt and sniffed at Nora's leg. She didn't even react. She looked like she would let herself be eaten and not fight it. That made something twist in Yalan's chest. He had no idea who she was, or what had happened to bring her here, but in that moment, he didn't need to. "No, come with me," he said, voice low and calm. "There's shelter. You can get warm." She shook her head violently. "If I leave, someone else takes my place," she whispered. Her lips trembled. "That's how they do it. You leave the pit, they drag someone else in." Yalan didn't understand, not fully, but he heard enough. Enough to know that this girl believed she deserved to stay in the dirt. Enough to know that someone had made her feel like saving herself was a crime. "I'm not them," he said. Nora's arms tightened around her ribs. "You're worse," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. You see me, and you still want to help." He took a breath. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." She stared at him, not flinching, not growling, just watching. He didn't reach for her again. Instead, he stood and extended his hand, not demanding, just offering. Rain dripped from his fingers, his palm open. Her hand hovered in the air, shaking slightly. Then, slowly, it landed in his dot. Her skin was ice cold. Her fingernails were cracked and caked in dirt. She stumbled as she stood, but he caught her, not possessively, not with force. Just enough to steady her. She leaned into him like someone who hadn't felt another human being in a very long time. Together, they walked across the yard, the mud sucking at their boots. The pigs barely noticed them. But something inside Nora had shifted. She didn't look back. The inside of the shed was small, dimly lit, and filled with the smell of old metal and rain-soaked fabric. A humming heater in the corner buzzed softly, just enough to warm the room. Yalin closed the door behind them and shook the water from his coat. Nora stood just inside, not moving. Her bare feet left muddy prints on the floor. The oversized coat still clung to her, hanging past her knees, heavy with water. She looked around like she expected a trap, like the walls might close in and swallow her whole. "You're safe here," Yalin said gently, not moving any closer. He didn't try to take the coat from her or ask questions. He pointed to a curtain. "At the back of the room. There's a wash station behind there. It's not much, but it's warm. You can clean up. I'll stay out here." Nora stared at the curtain. Her lips parted, but no words came. Her body shook, not from cold, not anymore. Something deeper was trembling inside her. She looked at Yalin again, eyes cautious. He didn't meet her gaze, just sat down on the floor, his back against the far wall. That was enough. She moved slowly toward the curtain, disappearing behind it without a word. For a long time, Yalin heard nothing. Just the soft buzz of the heater and the occasional drip from the ceiling. Then the sound of running water, fabric rustling. A soft gasp, broken and raw. He didn't speak. Whatever she was scrubbing away in there wasn't just dirt. It was pain, memories, shame. He leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes, letting the sound of water be her voice. Behind the curtain, Nora stood under a stream of warm water, her hands trembling as she rubbed at her skin. The grime came off easily, but the past didn't. It clung to her, under her fingernails, in the bruises and burns that marred her body. She hadn't felt warm water in so long it almost hurt. She cried without knowing she was crying. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts. Each pass of the washcloth was like wiping away another piece of the version of herself she had been forced to become. She didn't scrub to look better. She scrubbed to feel real again. When the water shut off, Yalin stood quietly, listening as she dried herself. He heard the curtain shift and looked up. Nora stepped out, wrapped in a gray towel. Her hair was damp, no longer wild but hanging in wet strands over her shoulders. Her skin, now free from mud, was pale and marked, but cleaner than it had been. In weeks, her eyes met his, not fiercely this time, but carefully. Searching, he stayed seated, didn't rush to speak. Just nodded toward the cot in the corner. "It's warm. You can rest there." Nora didn't answer. She didn't move. Her fingers gripped the edges of the towel like armor. Then, slowly, she crossed the room and sat on the edge of the cot. Her muscles were stiff, and she winced as the mattress dipped beneath her. She looked at him again. "Why?" she asked, her voice small. "Why are you doing this?" Yalin tilted his head slightly, watching her without staring. "Because someone should have done it for me," he said quietly. She blinked, as if trying to understand something that didn't make sense. "I don't get it," she said. "You don't even know me." "You don't have to know someone to care what happens to them," he replied. Silence sat between them like a third person in the room. Then she spoke again, even softer. "You're not going to ask where I came from?" "No," he said. "Not unless you want to tell me." "I don't. That I won't." Nora pulled the towel tighter around herself. The heater hummed. Louder now, warming the air. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The sound, the warmth, the stillness. It didn't feel like danger. It didn't feel like punishment. It felt strange. It felt kind. "My name's Nora," she said at last. The words slow, as if trying them out. Yalan nodded. "Nice to meet you, Nora." She gave him a quick glance, then looked away. She wasn't ready to smile. But something inside her relaxed. The hours passed without pressure. Yalan made tea using an old kettle on a hot plate. He offered her a mug. Without a word. She took it in both hands, the heat seeping into her fingers. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Something was being built quietly between them. Not trust. Not yet. But the beginning of something that might become trust. Later, when she finally lay back on the cot, pulling a thermal blanket over her clean skin, she looked at him with a tired expression. "You don't expect anything?" she asked. "Not a thing," Yalan replied. Her eyes stayed on him for a long moment. Then she nodded once and turned to face the wall. The tension in her shoulders faded, just a little. She let out a slow breath. It wasn't safety, not fully, but it was the closest she'd felt in a long time. The next morning, the quiet hum of the heater was replaced by something far less comforting. A faint alarm beeped from a terminal on the wall, pulsing a dull red light that barely reached across the room. Yalan was already awake, sitting at the edge of the cot, his shirt halfway buttoned. He glanced at the alert, then at Nora, who was still asleep under the blanket, curled toward the wall. Her breathing was soft and steady, but the peace of it made his stomach twist. He knew what that viewing alarm meant. He stood and moved to the terminal. A message flashed on the screen. "Biotrace detected. Unauthorized entity in Zone 4. Sweep en route." His jaw clenched. They had found her. Somehow, despite everything, they had traced her here. Behind him, Nora stirred. Her arm reached out to the empty space where he had been. She blinked at the red light, then at him. The sleep fell from her eyes quickly, replaced by something older, something that had kept her alive this long. She sat up without a word, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "They're coming," Yalan said. "I wiped your trace once, but they must have had a backup. We don't have long." Nora didn't panic. She stood fast, pulling her clothes from the chair. Her orange top, now washed but still torn, clung to her body as she tied it tight. Her skirt, damp and worn, was thrown on without care. She moved with the focus of someone who had escaped before, someone who understood what it meant to be hunted. Jalen handed her his old field jacket again. It was warm from the heater. She hesitated only a moment before slipping it on. She looked at him, not afraid, just clear. "How do we get out?" "There's an old drone shaft," he said, already grabbing his tools. "It's not on the patrol routes. Maintenance-only access." "How far down?" 20 meters. She raised an eyebrow. "No ladder? No ladder." "You did bring a soft landing pack, right?" He gave a tight smile. "Shock foam. It'll hold." "You're insane," she muttered, following him to the back hatch. "I'm yours," he replied without looking back. Her breath caught, but she didn't respond. She didn't need to. They exited through the slop tunnels, a narrow metal corridor that smelled of rot and grease. Above them, patrol drones hovered. Their motion was fast, sweeping the grounds with scanners that lit the mud like lightning. Nora crouched low behind a pipe while Yalan checked the path ahead. When the coast was clear, they ran silent, focused. No wasted steps. The silo was dark and hollow, a rusted husk with no light. They reached the shaft, the round opening stretching down into the black. Yalin pulled the shock foam grenade from his belt and dropped it. It hit the bottom with a soft thump, expanding into a padded layer of foam that would break their fall. "Ladies first," he said. Nora stepped to the edge, took a breath, and jumped. There was no scream, just the wind rushing past her body, and then silence. Yalin followed. The fall was jarring, but the foam held. When he looked up, Nora was already moving to the drone access panel. Her fingers flew across the controls. The panel clicked open. "This one's unlocked," she said. "How?" he asked. "Some idiot didn't reset the factory code," she replied, a grin breaking through despite the tension. "You just saved us." She glanced over at him, the glow from the screen lighting her face. "You already saved me." The drone pod was small, barely enough room for two people. They squeezed inside, the door sliding shut behind them. Engines hummed to life beneath the floor. Yalin leaned against the wall, breathing hard. Nora, still wrapped in his coat, sat across from him. Her hair was wild, her cheeks flushed. Her eyes were steady. "We made it," she whispered. Jalen reached out, took her hand, and threaded his fingers through hers. "You're free." She didn't look away. "And you're with me." The drone launched into the night, the noise fading as they rose away from the ruins below. The stars above seemed to stretch wider than before, as if the universe had opened its arms. In that quiet, weightless space, she moved across the small compartment and into his lap. The red warning light flickered across her face. "I want to remember this," she said, her voice low. "Not the running, not the fear, just this." Yalin touched her cheek. "Then we make it real." The rest of the flight was quiet. No alarms, no voices, only the soft hum of safety and the warmth of two people who were no longer alone. They didn't talk about what came next. Not yet. For now, it was enough to breathe, to hold on, to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were no longer running toward nothing, but towards something better. The med station floated quietly above the edge of known space. It wasn't much to look at, just metal walls patched together, old wiring humming behind thin panels, and lights that flickered like they were half asleep. But to Nora, it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. There were no guards here, no watchers, no cold voices barking orders. Just silence, peace. When the drone docked, no one asked questions. No one even looked twice. Jalen's ID passed the checkpoint, and they walked inside like two pieces finally finding where they belonged. Their quarters were small, a metal room with two narrow bunks, a cracked mirror, and a curtain that acted as a door, but it was clean, warm, and private. That alone felt like a miracle. Nora sat on the lower bunk, legs pulled up to her chest, the old field jacket still wrapped around her. Her wet hair clung to her face, and her eyes were soft, not from fear but from something else. Something like wonder. Yalin knelt in front of her, unlacing her boots one at a time with careful hands. She watched him, unsure how to speak the feeling in her chest. "You don't have to take care of me," she said softly. "Maybe I want to," he replied, not looking up. She leaned forward and kissed his forehead, not out of desperation, not out of fear, just gratitude, just love. Days passed. The station moved slowly in orbit, surrounded by stars that blinked like quiet promises. Nora started to walk barefoot through the garden dome late at night when no one else was there. It was small, filled with bioluminescent moss and synthetic vines, but it smelled like mint and earth, and it reminded her that she was alive. She wore a loose ivory shirt, now his, oversized and soft. Her hair was braided to the side, bits of yellow pollen caught between the strands. She laughed more. She flinched less. Yalin liked to watch her from the bench at the edge of the dome. He didn't speak when she danced barefoot in the grass. He just watched like someone seeing sunlight for the first time. One night, she turned, catching him looking. "You're doing it again," she said. "Watching?" She nodded. "I used to think being looked at was dangerous. Now it feels like a blessing." She walked toward him slowly, her steps silent. When she reached him, she climbed into his lap without asking. She rested her forehead against his. Her voice was a whisper. "I want to do something dangerous." His breath caught. "Yeah? I want to love you like it's the only thing keeping me alive." He didn't answer. He just lifted her gently, laying her down in the soft moss beneath them. Their bodies came together slowly, without fear, without shame. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. They made love the way people do when they are no longer afraid of being broken. Later, tangled in the moss, her head resting on his chest, her fingers traced the beat of his heart. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, softly she said, "Yalan, I need to tell you something." He opened his eyes. "What is it?" "I went to the med pod today. Just for a scan, routine stuff." His heartbeat quickened under her hand. "They found something," she said. "Twice, to be sure. I'm pregnant." He didn't breathe for a second. She pressed his hand to her belly. There was no bump yet, no movement. But it was real. "It was happening. I'm not broken," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought I was, but I'm not." Yalan pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "You never were." Weeks passed. The station began to feel less like a hiding place and more like a home. Nora sat cross-legged in the garden dome, her hand pressed to her stomach, now softly rounded beneath her tunic. Above her, the lights flickered like sleepy stars. Yalan sat behind her, braiding her hair slowly, fingers moving with care. "In my people's tradition," she whispered, "braiding someone's hair means their family." He smiled and kissed the back of her neck. "Then you've already claimed me." She leaned back against him. There was no fear anymore. Only warmth. "They'll grow up knowing what safety feels like," she said. "They'll grow up knowing love," he whispered. For the first time, Nora believed it. She closed her eyes, her hand over his. "I'm not trash," she whispered. "I'm worth keeping." Yalan kissed her temple gently. "You always were." And somewhere beyond the station's walls, the stars went on blinking, as if they'd been waiting all along for someone like her to shine.